Hey guys, it's Lucid, and we're going to be doing the national overview for Ctis. I've played middle-aged Ctis before on the channel, so you can go check it out. It's a really old video. It's one of the few videos I forgot to turn the Dominion soundtrack off on, and so for me, it's most notable for getting literally hundreds of copyright claims on it. So yeah, go watch it if you want some very nice Dominion's music running in the background. It's a cool nation. I've thought about it. So when I played it scales, and I still think that's the way to play it. We'll talk about a few other things, but I think this nation can potentially be, I don't know, like they've got really strong mechanics. The important thing to consider is that you're in an era of really strong nations. Middle age tends to be the age with like nations with some of the strongest mechanics in the game. And we're right up there with them with this. We'll talk about what the challenges are with this nation because there's quite a few. But I'm going to try to do this overview mostly at a high level rather than kind of at a really low level, where we talk through each and every unit. So yeah, let's get started. I want to start off by talking about these guys. I didn't really talk about them much before, but there's a few things we should point out. These are like near Anikite tier stats. This bite benefits from strength. This is a linked 4 weapon, which means with like bonus attack, you can potentially be repelling a lot of stuff. So one thing you can consider now, you get 2 sacreds with this nation. You get the Swamp Guard, this guy, and you get the Sobek Sacred Guard, this guy. You don't get like Recruit Anywheres for sacreds. So the problem leaning into sacreds with this nation isn't that your sacreds aren't good. These guys are pretty sick. The problem is much more just that, oh, the other thing that's really cool about this guy is this is a 2-handed weapon, which he is... There's a few units in the game which are like single fisting a 2-handed weapon. He's doing it in the picture here, but he's not wielding like a shield. Some of the like the other ones that do it are like the War Shamblers. They're like single fisting a 2-handed weapon, and you get like extra bonus to damage from strength if it's a 2-handed weapon. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, this guy is sick. He's a great sacred. The only real problem with him is he's cold-blooded. But yeah, he's pretty good. These guys, not too much to write home about. While you can do a strategy based on these, there's really not much. The opportunity cost of doing that is too high. Because instead, you could be making your Scales troops and more mages. And for Scales troops, you really only have a couple options. There's really 3 things you probably want to use. The first, which you're of course expecting me to talk about, is the Elite Warrior. Now, why do I like the Elite Warrior? It's because it has a 2-handed, 20 piercing damage attack with a pretty high attack score. That means that this is going to kill elites, like things that are relying on protection are going to get ruined by this. I mean, really, practically most things are going to get ruined by this. They have a second bite. The bite, not so great against elites, but it helps to clear the chaff. You get 6 attacks a tile out of this. These are just ridiculously killy in melee, and they have enough protection. Okay, they have 10 protection. It's not enough protection for them to like be very survivable, but that brings us to the next point, which is that they hardly cost anything to produce in terms of resources or recruitment points. So you can have literal hordes of them. The other thing that's super nice about them is they're slaves, and the nice thing about that is you pay half upkeep. The downside of that is slaves tend to have shitty morale. That's not like a property of the slave tag, really. It's more just when they were designing units that were slaves, they also gave low morale. This is a fixable problem for us, though. We have like these guys who are Taskmaster 1 as generals, so that's a bonus 1 to morale. You can also put on them the Rat Tail Whip, which is going to let this guy lead a ton of dudes, and additionally, he's going to be able to give them bonus 1 morale from that. You can also do the Horn of Valor, which is pretty easy for this nation to forge, get bonus morale. You can also spam out Sermon of Courage if you want to. And the Sacred Serpents, which you get in temples, from temples, are slower than these guys, which is important because if you put them in the same squad, you probably don't want your Sacred Serpents running in and dying. But they give the Standard Bearer effect, which will give +1 morale. So all that's pretty significant. I don't think anybody else here has Taskmaster. Just checking. But yeah, so these guys have pretty much one major problem. Not one, but the major problem they have is morale. And that's reasonably easy to fix by just taking these guys, giving them a rat tail, and then putting all of your elite warriors on there. And, you know, be conscious of like whether you're fighting in friendly dominion or enemy dominion. That's a 2-point morale swing. The thing is that while they can have really bad morale, you're also going to be like the fights with them are going to tend to be over really quick. This is like fights with elite warriors are generally not like, oh, you know, super heavily armored knights sitting there and trading blows. Like things are going to blow up on the front line. Like if your elite warriors aren't killing things quickly, yeah. The other kind of weakness of elite warriors is they don't have shields and they don't have great protection. But I guess while we're at it too, I'll mention they have the upkeep basically of like a 7 or 8 gold unit. So that's actually really nice. You pay a bit more in gold up front, but it's totally worth it for these stats. They don't have a shield though, right? So most players in the Middle Age aren't going to be massing archers. There's some that will, like you can kind of expect it from like middle-aged man, middle-aged Tianqimite. Trying to think what else. There might be a couple nations that will try to go for like a massed archery kind of play. It's not common, right? Because there's usually not a lot of crossbows in the Middle Age. Ulm might, you know, if they do, these guys are going to be kind of roadkill, right? Because you're actually, I mean, they're going to be really bad against massed archers. They don't have enough protection to really survive too many hits, and they have, you know, they're not going to have great morale. So what will tend to happen if these guys run into a ton of archers is they'll get plinked down. By the time they make contact, they'll be about ready to run. They'll make contact for a round or two, and then they'll run. So while these guys are excellent in melee, you want to be really careful about bringing them up against like 200 or 300 archers. If you're going to be running into archers, you have other options. Like you could get these heavy infantry that have these big shields. They'll do okay. The only problem with these guys is they're going to kind of suck. Like fighting in melee. There's not many things these guys are going to... I mean, these are pretty basic stats. I mean, the only thing that's kind of special about them is they have poison resistance. So... And that being said, we're going to be talking about like how to play the nation. We're going to go through some of these units here at the beginning, but I'm going to focus more on like the strategies. And the elite warrior, which is like the kill everything strategy, like quickly, that doesn't really combine very well with like a lot of the spells we're going to be doing. So while the elite warriors are great for like throwing 200 at your enemy and just watching them melt, for other things like a foul vapor trap or fatigue plays, you might actually just care about not dying. And the more you care about not dying, the more something like this looks like a reasonable option. 11 hit points, 16 protection, and a shield. So if it's more like hold the line, we're going to rely on mages. You can look more here at the heavy infantry. If you're looking at more killing things in melee, you can look more at like the elite warriors. And of course, these Sobek warriors, which you can also get in the capital, are also great for holding the line. Again, these are capital only, but basically everything here and over. But yeah, still worth considering. The Falconeer is a bit heavier, right? So 15 protection actually costs a bit less gold, but significant, but twice the upkeep basically as the elite warrior. Versus like elites, these guys tend to do worse. They tend to get repelled, right? Because they only have linked one weapons. If things are like pretty high protection, these can just not do damage at all. Whereas this guy's usually going to be punching through high protection. But he's going to do a lot better against like casual archer fire because he has 15 protection instead of 10. He also has a hat on, which is going to be helpful against archer fire. So these are like a middle ground for significantly more survivable than the elite warriors, but significantly worse in melee. I would say in general, it's a broad statement. It's not always going to be true. There's going to be some types of enemies the Falconeer will be better against in melee. But especially when you factor in the very low resource and recruitment cost of the elite warrior, it's like half of this. These guys just trade super well in melee. But yeah, I mean, Falconeers certainly have a place. I'd be very careful about having them fight into things with high attack skill and long weapons. But, you know, they can be an interesting kind of middle ground for, you want something more killy than the heavy infantry, but you want something more survivable because you're going with, like, you know, a mage roster, where you're relying on the mage roster to kill stuff. So we're going to talk about mages. I think I want to kind of zoom out. I think, like, the things... there's some things I probably should have talked about at the beginning of the video. Like, what is it that makes Ctis special? Like, what are the really strong mechanics we have? One of them is that you get this special type of dominion. I think it's called miasma or something like that. But basically, every additional candle you have in a province is going to give you 1% more income in that province. And that's going to stack with your scales. So if you're 10 candles in your capital, you're getting a bonus 10% income. That can be kind of a lot. Like, you know, it's like a bonus. If you have 500 gold capital, that could be like 50 more gold. So it's a big deal. Additionally, it's going to give enemies disease. And the chance of that is also based on how much dominion you have in that province. It won't affect units with swamp survival. And it won't affect your own sacred units. So that's the thing. The downside of it is if you're like charming things or if you're getting indie mages, they will also die in your dominion. You can fix that by giving them like Boots of the Spider, which give you swamp survival. And then they can survive. But yeah. I mean, the other thing you could kind of do is take like a recuperation bless and then put shrouds on people, and then they would get disease, but it would go away. So all different things you can do. But yeah, the thing is that very few players are going to want to attack into you, because having killed quite a few middle-aged Ctis myself, you can fight into this, right? And I mean, you can even keep an army going for a long time fighting into it. Like, you just keep casting mass regen, they'll heal back up. You know, every fight. But by God, after like 10 turns, if they're not dead yet, they're beaten to hell. Right? They got a ton of afflictions. It's kind of annoying. Most people don't want to do that. Especially if you're looking like a healthy, strong Ctis player. The odds are they're going to go mess with somebody else. So this is one of the really powerful mechanics that you have. You basically have the opportunity to have more income per province than other players. And it's going to suck attacking into you. The other thing that's going to go kind of feed into this is we have Recruit Anywhere Holy Threes. Now, these are 4 recruitment points, so they're slow to recruit. But importantly, I mean, they can smite, which is cool. But they can also preach, which is also cool. If you go for a low Dominion build, you can actually make enough Lizard Kings. They recruit anywhere. You make enough Lizard Kings to just preach all your land up to at least 6 candles, right? So you don't even have to go high Dominion. If you put, you know, like temples in all the provinces you care about, you can preach up to 7 candles. So that's just kind of the preaching math, is it's twice your holy level is how high you can preach to, and then +1 if there's a temple there. So yeah, the fact that you can get these everywhere is pretty sick. It means you can have really good Dominion control. And it also means, like, if you're on a war footing, you can potentially preach on top of enemy forts, get your Dominion spread in there, which is also going to help with, like, dealing with morale issues with some of your lower morale troops. The thing we're going to have to talk about next is the Marshmaster. And this guy kind of is the key to the whole nation in a way. There's 2 keys, this guy and the Shaman. There's other units that have parts to play, but these are the keys. There's a few things to note about this. One is this is one of the highest recruit anywhere to commander point, like two. It's not a slow to recruit mage. It's one of the it's a 6-path recruit anywhere, not slow to recruit mage, right? You're going to have a water random, you're going to have a death random, you're going to have a nature random, and you're going to have an astral random. And those are all going to be really sick. We'll talk about each of them. But, yeah, they are really, really good. The obvious thing, the thing that's kind of like defining for Ctis, like when you fight Ctis, if you fight Ctis and you're not planning for Rigor Mortis, Quagmire, and Foul Vapors, then you have not done even the basic minimum of preparation, because that is like the Ctis classic, is casting those spells. And these guys can do it all. The Death randoms with the Skull Staff can do Rigor Mortis. All of them can do Foul Vapors. And the Water randoms can do, and the Astral randoms can do, what's the... oh, God. What am I thinking of? Quagmire. It's for, yeah, so you actually might be better off with the Astral randoms. These guys will need, the Water randoms here will need an additional booster. So they'll need like a Water Bracelet. So once you have Construction 6, Quagmire super trivial. Before then, it's a little tricky. You probably have to do it with an Astral random. Jumped into a Communion. But, I mean, that's a really powerful combo. The combination is things are tiring out. They're getting cooked by Foul Vapors. And yeah, there's just a lot of nations that are going to get hard shut down by that. And you're going to be backing that up. These guys can all cast Horde of Skeletons and stuff. So there's going to be a lot of Skelly spam behind all of that. So it's a really potent combo. There's some things that don't really give a shit about that. Like flyers in general are going to jump in and the fight's going to be over really quick. So it's not going to work great there. I mean, even heavy cav... Sorry, I'm still recovering from COVID. Even heavy cav will cross the battlefield fast enough where it'll be less of an issue. But, yeah, it's a really devastating combo. Really, really good. But that is not all that these guys can do. The other thing they're really good at is research. While these guys are not, like, crazy gold efficient for research, they're very fort turn efficient. And what that means is you can get a lot of research out really fast with these guys. So, like, while you may be able to get better value for, like, you know, taking some crappy research, or even your shamans, especially upkeep-wise, are going to probably be a better research value than these, especially in Magic 3. So, like, you could choose to do that, but you have to put up fewer forts to max out. Like, if you put up 2 forts, that's gonna, and you're just slamming Marshmasters in each of them, that's gonna ruin your money real fast, right? Like, you're able to turn a lot of money into mages really quickly doing that. But if you're doing shamans, maybe you take 3 or 4 forts to spend all your money, which means you're spending a lot more on infrastructure at the beginning of the game. So these guys, when you're just thinking about like how this nation plays, they can really, really accelerate your research. And it's one of the nice things about playing this nation's scales is that if you're playing with like these troops, you can just have them on normal commanders. Again, you know, a risk with that, they have kind of low morale, so you got to be a little careful. But especially with like lance charges routing the squad, so, you know, get chaff and things like that. But, you know, you can be getting normal commanders to lead your squads and just be slamming Marshmasters. And you'll have really, really, really high research. Like, if you make one of these every turn, by turn 12, even if you're just like neutral scales, by turn 12, you'll be at, what is it, 17 times 12, which is, let's see, 17 times 12 is 200. 200 research a turn by the end of the first year is ridiculous right? That means like enchantment 5, which is when you have like all these things start hitting, it's going to be super fast. Super fast. So that's the other thing where these guys are really sick. The other thing that's pretty ridiculous about these dudes is you can also do Twiceborn transformation shenanigans to turn these guys into white mages. It's a sorry guys, COVID. It's a reason to consider luck scales too, right? Because that does get more efficient with luck. You're much less likely to kill these guys off. You know, the nice thing is though, you can do like Twiceborn first, then start doing transformation. If they die, so what? It's also another reason to potentially consider recuperation bless. If you get like a feeble-minded dude or two, you can just drop a shroud on them. Bada bing, bada boom. Now they're not feeble-minded anymore. So that's something to consider with these guys. What else can these guys do? Skelly spam we've talked about. How they can cast. They can also do, if you're turning them into white mages, like I mentioned, and you may be able to get big white mages, like size 6 ones, they're able to do personal regen, they're able to do moss body, they're able to do liquid body, right? So you've got fizz moss. They can do with a gem, especially if it's a death random, they can do soul vortex, invulnerability, quicken self, enlarge. There's a bunch of things they can do. So you could have little, you know, thugs and super combatants running around that were formerly Marsh Masters. So again, these guys are absolutely ridiculous. The next unit we have to talk about here is the Shaman. These are cheaper, I believe, than their indie counterparts. And they're amazing. They have a sacred tag. So if you take a bless, can be good on them. Arcane Finesse is really good because most of the astral stuff you're going to be doing is MR negates. So Arcane Finesse is going to be really good there for a bless. You can also think about potentially wiring these guys up into like a turbo communion sort of thing because you can get regen on them. It's going to be hard getting too much regen though. Like you're at 13, you could maybe get this up to like 21 and then you're getting like 3 regen a turn. That's not really a very powerful turbo communion. So I don't know if that's really worth it, but it's something to consider. But what these guys do is they do a lot of things. One is they're going to be your best. These guys are 36 upkeep a year compared to your Marsh Masters, who are 188. These guys are in the long run going to be significantly more efficient researchers. So one thing you might consider doing is making these guys almost exclusively, they also don't require temples, until you get first key research target for first war, right? Like, let's say it's enchantment 5 or something, right? You do that to kind of rush and get there. And then after that, maybe you switch to being a bit more efficient. Now, you want to be very careful about getting an efficient mage who isn't good at combat, because if you get attacked, you could be in trouble. These guys, however, are very good in combat. Not only can they point buff your troops with like body ethereal and stuff, but they can jump in communions and do arbitrarily high nature magic and astral magic. So things like Soul Slay. Later in the game, Enslave Mind and Charm. Charm is really good. Like if you watch my Macone game, basically when I'm like, I'm done, I can't play Macone one more turn, is when I had put together some Doom stack and I ran into Ctis and he just did the normal things where he quagmired, rigor mortis, a bunch of other things. But the thing that really did it for me was he had a big stack of shamans and they were spamming charm and they just stole all my shit and I was like, I can't handle this. I am ending my nap with all my neighbors. I will fight you all, come kill me. Yeah, these guys are really good. Really big groups of them doing, you know, with like 10 masters or something, casting spamming Enslave Mind and Charm is really strong. It is really good. You can also make boosters with these guys. You can do the Eye of the Void, you know, spell focus, things like that to increase your spell penetration. They're really good. Yeah. And it's not like they're operating in solo. The right way to think about it is they're operating in tandem with these dudes, right? So you can have Foul Vapors, Serpent's Blessing, Rigor Mortis, whatever. And then meanwhile, you've got a communion of these things that's picking off like thugs and super combatants with Enslaved Mind and Charm and stuff. And then these guys are like spamming out Horde of Skeletons and stuff. So they're really good. I mean, this is like truly a shining star on the nation. The other things here, which are, you know, kind of a little more situational. The Lizard King, you can potentially do... They're slow to recruit, so probably not going to be a great choice, especially when your alternative is, like, slamming Marshmasters early, right? So, like, this isn't like Bogaroos, where you get 2 commander point Holy Threes. But this is still a really important unit for controlling your Dominion, getting bonus income... making it so your enemies really don't want to attack, because marching into like 6 dominions is a lot different than marching into like 1 or 2. So yeah, they're pretty cool. These high priests, they can get sacred serpents and temples. These are totally worth it, by the way, to get just to get the morale bonus for your squads. So have a few of these guys getting it. They're not like amazing units, especially if you don't take much of a bless, but it's worth it just for the morale bonus. The other unit which bears mentioning here is the Empoisoner. And you can do Assassin expansion. If you get... if you take like 1 Marshmaster or 2 Marshmasters for your first couple turns, depending on what your research... If you take Magic 3, there's a very good chance you get an Enchantment 1. But these guys with Enchantment 1 are really good poisoner, or assassins. They just make skeletons, make a few skeletons... and then you can have them right before they're fatigued out. They do poison sling or something. They've got a pretty good goddamn chance to kill whatever they're fighting. Because the ranged attacks don't use fatigue. So you do a few skeleton summons, poison sling. That'll work most of the time. Don't go too ham. Maybe make 1 assassin expansion party. You should, and you'll use that to take things which are hard for whatever expansion troop you're using. I like to use these for expansion. These guys can struggle. If you're running into heavy cav, they need lance catchers. They can also struggle in archers, right? So you can just target whatever is going to give you trouble. All right. Sorry, I had to get up for a second, so I kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, when you're looking, we're going to look at like threat vectors. Like what are all the different things Ctis can do? They can already do like the Rigor Mortis, Foul Vapors, Quagmire stuff. They can do the... Soul Slay, Enslaved Mind, Charm sort of stuff. They can also do like Mass Protection. They can also do Will of Fates. You can put up Light of the Northern Star to power up your Astral Communions more. But yeah, like Elite Warriors become way good again once you get things like Will of Fates on them. The things like this combo, by the way, like Rigor Mortis, Grip of Winter. I mean Grip of Winter too. But Rigor Mortis, Quagmire, Foul Vapors, Skelly Spam is really good. Like you can kind of ride on the back of that for a long time. The things that you'll have to worry about are like when the battlefield wipes start coming out. So that's like even things like Earthquake, but certainly Firestorm, Wrathful Skies. What do you do against that? The other things that can be kind of tricky are like things like Wailing Winds and stuff like that can also be tricky. But like, what do you do against the stuff like that? You can potentially switch to doing things like Shadow Blast, try to make the battle end quick. It's really helpful if you have like a mass flight caster. The other thing you can do that's a little bit overlooked is all nature mages, which all our mages have nature, can cast Elemental Fortitude. So you can do that like the beginning of combat. And that's going to give you a bonus 5 resistance to everything for your mage core. Throw on top of that Will of Fates and mass regen. These are now pretty high-tech things. You know, it's Alt 8, enchantment 8. But once you have both of those, you'll survive through those things a lot better. The other thing, of course, is that, water is going to potentially give you warriors of, is it Methuselah? But anyway, it can give you both fire and cold resistance once you get high enough. And, that's going to be enough to help with dealing with like Firestorm and things like that. Firestorm's still going to mess up your skeletons you summon, but anyhow, that can work. And Will of Fates is Firestorm. The way Firestorm works is it's like way more procs but lower damage, and Wrathful Skies is way higher damage, harder to resist, and but fewer procs. Firestorm is better generally against Skelly spam, but the Wrathful Skies is potentially going to do a much better job at killing your mages and troops. But things like Will of Fates and Mass Regen are going to be better against Wrathful Skies, especially if you throw on Elemental Fortitude. So yeah. The other timings you kind of get are Mass Protection. That can be really nice, especially if you're not fighting a Fire Nation. And yeah, Will of Fates. So what are the other threat vectors we have? We already talked about white, turning these guys into white mage, but also with transformation, maybe getting really big chassis out of it. That's really nice just for increasing your number of threat vectors. If you do it on the Astral random with a Crystal Coin and a Starshine Skullcap, they can teleport, which is a big deal. Because now you're introducing magic phase attacks, which weren't really much of a thing before. So how do you actually win the game? Let's talk about that. I think the way you win a game with Ctis is you kill somebody very early on with Elite Warriors, pick your target carefully, and just go murder them. There should be, there's a decent number of nations who, if they're not played damn near perfectly, will just die to an Elite Warrior rush. You can just make so many of them. You just hold down the Elite Warrior button and just slam them. There's a lot of nations that can survive that can't survive that very easily, or you'll certainly give yourself a lot of opportunity to outplay them. So that's one nice thing, being able to be strong and aggressive early. These guys can do that pretty well. For the mid game, you can potentially have another war as soon as, and you don't even have to have the first war. You can just wait, because slamming Sauramancers, it happens pretty quickly. You get where you're ready to do, Foul Vapors, Rigor Mortis, that sort of stuff. So that's really your second and maybe even third war. There's so much money that goes into, there's so much writing on top of those strategies. Even if things have poison resistance, Quagmire and Rigor Mortis and Skelly Spam will shut down so much stuff. So, yeah. And these guys, by the way, you can still use them as bodyguards. They're not amazing bodyguards, but they're cheap to produce and they're cheap to maintain. So you can just put them on Guard Commander, have a big mage pile that walks around spamming stuff out. There's vulnerabilities doing that. You can, Thunderstrike Communions or Masked Air Elemental. There's a bunch of things that can be kind of annoying, but that can work. So that gets you through the early mid game. Deeper into the mid game, you're going to want to be twice running these guys. One of the things we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about is Cold Blooded. This is punishing. You get just a tremendous amount of fatigue when fighting in cold provinces. It's people are oh, you can fight in cold with it. I mean, not really. Your troops get punished, your mages get pretty punished. You can put up a spell or two. If Howl and Foul Vapors will kill stuff, maybe you still have a shot fighting in cold. It is rough, though. It is really rough. I think the thing to think about when dealing with cold is controlling your Dominion with Lizard Kings, active preaching to control Dominion. And it doesn't have to be just Lizard Kings. You could also use High Priests or, Indie Priests or whatever you want to. But just actively controlling your Dominion is really good for this nation in general, but it's also especially important on a cold nation border, because you really don't want those temperature scales coming in. The other way to kind of deal with them is you can reanimate, right? So these Sarumancers, you can cast reanimation, or like these guys, you can, cast reanimation with them. And yeah, you get a big pile of long dead for your troops, and you get Twiceborn Marshmasters as your commanders. And there's potentially a timing there where you try to kill one of your cold neighbors with undead commanders leading undead troops. And so for that, it's nice to send a couple of Marshmasters running around site searching. So hopefully you get a decent death income. You can turn those into long dead and then go try to kill one of your cold neighbors before they have like all the appropriate counters. Alternatively, you can just kind of hope that they remain peaceful with you and you don't have to deal with them. Illwinter deserves maybe special mention here. If there's a nation that can cast Illwinter in your game, you probably need to be able to think about putting up Second Sun, which is going to increase the heat on the map. Or you need to think about killing that player. Like that should be one of your main diplomatic objectives, is getting Illwinter casters killed. Because while you can do it, you really don't want your entire, like, it's really bad if the entire world goes to Cold 3 for a cold-blooded nation. Sorry again. So anyway, that's like one of the mid-game things you're probably gonna have to deal with, is how do you deal with like cold nations? And I think that's the main way. It's just long dead troops and Twiceborn mages. You can also, since you're running up enchantment reasonably quickly, you can also look at maybe like life after death, converting a bunch of these guys into like soulless mages, and then using them in a cold war, a cold temperature scale war. So that's another option for you. But as we start transitioning into late game, this is no longer the exact like area where Ctis like truly shines. These guys are great. I would say the more the game goes later, you want to be switching away from you want to be getting more into shamans, right? Like as you have Enslaved Mind and Charm come out, these guys get significantly better. So I'm not saying don't make Marshmasters. You want to make a lot of them all game, right? But as the game goes later, these shamans are going to become more and more valuable with just being able to do big astral things. And then the upkeep of, their really low upkeep is also going to be super nice. So, as the game goes late, though, how do you win? You basically have a few different ways. You can make a try with this nation. You can actually get these guys up to Nature 5. You can have the Astral ones with enough boosters. If you can make the booster do Moonvine Bracelet. And then a Thistle Mace. And then we're up at Nature 5 on a Nature random. So that's enough to potentially cast Mother Oak. Especially if you think about like you don't have an Astral 2 on the nation. I think one of your heroes might be, but something to think about on your god, maybe taking Astral 2, maybe taking even higher Astral, and then making like a Ring of Wizardry, Ring of Sorcery. Because one of the things you'll need to think about is you don't have like amazing magic diversity as Ctis. So like, how do we break into earth? How do we break into air? You want to like ideally get a sense of what the thrones are around you. See if you can maybe find some good mages, some good indie mages that are going to break you into some of those paths. One of the cheapest one of the cheapest in terms of like design points for breaking into other weird random paths is getting high astral, but you have to wait until you get up to like Alteration 9, and then you can like wish for stuff. But if you're playing a Scales nation that has efficient researchers like we do, you can potentially like, let me go Imprisoned here. We can take almost perfect Scales. Something like this, right? And then you could potentially get Arcane Finesse and maybe like a little bit of MR. you can potentially look at doing this on another chassis. But one thing you do want to remember with Ctis is, even though you're going a scales nation where you could normally dump Dominion, on this particular nation, you'd rather not. You get more income. It's also going to make you more cancerous to invade. So something like this is going to be pretty nice. Transformation rolls are going to be pretty good with the Luck 3. Magic 3 is going to be really good for making shamans to be, certainly equal participants in your research core. And it's also going to make Marshmasters really good in Friendly Dominion. They're just going to be slamming spells. So, yeah, I mean, you can do something like this, and that will be fine. The problem with this particular build is, and why you might consider maybe something like this chassis. Okay, let's talk about the chassis real quick. This one has 4 miscellaneous slots, means it's a lot higher to climb up to like really high astral for wish. That was why when I only put 5 in, because with 5 I believe you are able to climb up to 9. You're gonna need like an artifact here, but you could do crystal coin, ring of wizardry, ring of sorcery, and then you'd need like something else. There's a few other astral boosters, but you could put one of them in here. And yeah, that would work. The problem with this chassis is that like the water isn't really a great cross path. You really kind of want this earth one more so that you can do like crystal coins, which would be super nice, because crystal coins are one of the ways you're going to be able to like magic phase with Sauromancers, the astral randoms, which if they're turned into like white mage thugs is kind of a big deal. So, I mean, honestly, you only really need earth 2. You could go potentially higher earth, right? Like you could maybe do like a bunch of reinvigoration here. Or if you're really worried about battlefield wipes, you could do something like this, right? Because you're running up high into enchantment, you have the option to try to put up Earthblood Deepwell. The problem with that is you don't have any Earth Mages to site search until your god would come out. So that's a bit of a zinger. Unlikely to control Earthblood Deepwell with this, but it opens it up as a possibility. And then with only 1 slot on here, to actually have a chance of casting Wish, you would need to be all the way up really at Astral 8, which is not prohibitively, it's expensive. But I mean, we could do it. We just have to like not have amazing scales now. Right, so that's a pretty big hit. We've had to basically sack 2 of our scales back to neutral. And then it actually probably be more than that because we want to be up at like 7 here. So, but this is a pretty expensive god. I mean, you could drop... I don't think you would want to do both of these because the scales are too important. But you could look at getting... I mean, the other option is coming down here and getting like any one of the astral pretenders here and going like 5. The problem with this is that the Dominion ends up being expensive. But yeah, you can see just to get up to 7, we're already negative. So the Oracle is like by far the cheapest chassis to do this. And you can even, I think it's probably even cheaper to get a little bit of earth on the Oracle just so you can do like crystal coins and stuff. So this would be, I mean, this would be a pretty reasonable build, something like this. And then I roll 8, 6. I don't know. The infamous -1 point. Yeah, I'm not exact. I mean, 3 would be nice. You could make hammers too. Something like this. I mean, you don't even really need Magic 3. You can go to Magic 2. And something like this, these are really good scales. You open the opportunity to, like, I don't know, maybe from a throne or something, pick up another scale or 2. The exact thing that you do isn't really terribly important. The bigger thing is, like, to win in the late game with a nation like this, like, you're not going to be the strongest late game power based on just your mage core. You'll have, like, cool stuff you can do, but you don't have a ton of diversity compared to some of the other nations. So you'll need a plan for the late game. And the plan needs to be around fixing the magic diversity issues that you have. That can be having something to do with wish, where you just like wish for a seraph or something, and like, okay, it's going to be minus, when you add up like the divine name and stuff, we're really looking around like minus 120 something pearls, but we've now fixed that issue. The problem is that comes online real late. The mage you're getting, like if you're getting an air mage, like a seraph or something, it's not going to really, by that time in the game, you're not going to want it running around like site searching. So it's a bit of a weakness there in the build for that. You can try to take a rainbow too, maybe like a really cheap rainbow, and just have like a little bit and maybe site search with him when he wakes up. Like have 2s in some of the paths. We can see what that would look like. We can just take like... yeah, I don't think it's really going to matter here too much. We'll take this guy, I guess. We don't need death. We don't need nature. Earth 2 would be really good. Water, you can climb up from 1. Air, you're not really going to be climbing up air. Air might be one to consider getting at 4. It's going to be really hard to climb up, but if you're doing a build like this, it would be pretty helpful. And then fire, this would, I think you actually are going to technically need fire too. And maybe you don't need the blood or not. I mean, the blood is kind of nice for some of the other things, but yeah, I mean, you could do something like this. This also is going to open up rune smashers, which is kind of cool. I don't know. You could do something like this and make it where you're like you could maybe, if you're fighting an air nation, you have a bunch of shamans that are all going to be shock immune. But yeah, I mean, he would wake up and then you site search. Site searching with an imprisoned, not really an amazing use of time. So I don't know. I think the way I would play it, if I were to play them again, is I would probably go with this guy. I would lean into having like a really strong mid game with having a ton of money. And if the game goes really late, I would basically just plan on like having a ton more money than everybody because I have really good scales. Would I get Earth? I think I would count on getting the Earth Astral random cross path from like a site or from indie mages, or trade for the crystal coins that I would need. But I don't think I would wait. I think it's too many design points. I don't really want to sacrifice a scale for it. So yeah, I'd probably do something like this with near perfect scales. Not magic weapons, arcane finesse. Yeah, I do something like this, guys. Really, really simple, full scales. But the important thing to think about is while you have like a really strong, obvious strategy, or a few of them revolving mainly around Marsh Masters, as the game goes on, you're going to switch more into Shamans. You're going to have plenty of Marsh Masters still. You're going to increase your number of threat vectors by having like Magic Phase Titans that can run around that are twice-born mages. Yeah. And ultimately, though, and this is like where there's like you're really strong in the mid game, the late game, you're working through some issues. You have some like, you're adding some variety of threat vectors to your army. But you start lacking magic diversity, which really hurts you in the late game. You start fixing that like way later once you start getting like Alt 9 or something like that, and you can wish for things. Or, even just if you get good indies, being able to make with your god like a ring of sorcery or a ring of wizardry is going to help you climb those paths. You can also climb, I should mention this too, you can climb into air pretty easily with nature with like fairy queens and stuff, so that's like another important target for this nation. Because really you're going to need air to get like, Thunderfend and stuff down as you get ready to fight air nations and stuff in the late game. I think we've hit on about everything. I think in some ways this is a nation with like a lot of obvious strategies that you can just hammer people with. But I think the opportunity for like being a really good player is doing some of the other things that people wouldn't be thinking about, right? Like using the Marshmasters as twice-born thugs, using more shamans than people would expect with charm and enslaved mind. Potentially there's, if you do have even if you don't really have a bless, like these guys with body ethereal, because you can actually put one of these guys and one of these guys both in a tile. If you have a bless, you can get them buffed with body ethereal and luck and stuff too if you want to. And then making really good use of these in poisoners. They're really good. They can do swarm and then obviously summon long dead. So like the degree to which you're able to do all those things, I think will determine like how successful you are with this nation. But ultimately you want to like take advantage of the fact that you make more money than everybody else. Take advantage of the fact that nobody wants to attack you because you have like really toxic dominion. Be really predatory in your first war with elite warriors. Pick a target, maybe pick a target at the right time, like before Enchantment 7 stuff comes out, to just murder with Marshmasters. And then from there you can actually, do you think about maybe going on trying to win the game, going for like a throne push before it goes too late, maybe some of the like the wind leaves your sails, or do you start really transitioning for the late game, switching to the more like economic focused researchers, trying to get up to some of the really big things that are going to, like Will of Fates and stuff, which are really going to swing battles for you. And then maybe tech into some of the things you need to, like try to get some air through Fairy Queens. You can also, it's worth mentioning, break into Earth Astral through Summon Spectre, which is a conjuration spell that you'll be able to cast. It takes like a lot of cast, but you get pretty good thug chassis out of it if it doesn't work. So anyway, I think that's about it. Thank you all for watching, and take care. See you next time.